In this presentation, we will see what data sources are possible for the OPC system service. We will see how to programmatically and manually configure OPC items from Data Access 2.0 and 3.0 OPC servers. We will see how to use the OPC Systems.net OPC Server for third-party OPC clients. We'll also discover how to programmatically read and write data to the real-time database from Visual Studio standard applications, web applications, and mobile Pocket PC applications, and how to read data from databases using the OPC Recipe.net product, and how to log data using OPC Database.net. Let's take a look at the real-time database in the OPC System Service. The best way to do that is using the Configure application found under the program group OPC Systems.net. Select the Configure OPC Systems application. We can then use Configure tags to look at a local service or remote services by putting in a network node name or an IP address, or even a registered domain name. We're going to look at the local service by selecting localhost. If you have the demo configuration loaded, you'll have example tags in front of you. We can go down to the ramp tag and use it to take a look at some of the data sources that are possible. The default data source would be a fixed value. If we chose this type, whatever value is in the value field would then be the resultant value that you could then trend, data log, alarm. You can choose different data types for a particular tag. If it's a discrete tag, you would choose Boolean. For string types, you would choose string. Integers, there are signed and unsigned integers. The default is a double float. If you don't know your data type, you can choose object type. And then you can use even custom data types with structures, arrays, all kinds of different possibilities are available with the object type. Let's choose the default double float. With a fixed value, you would use the OPC controls data component to write to a item. And this way you can turn your Visual Studio application as a data source for the OPC system service. We will demonstrate the OPC controls data component later in this example. One of the most commonly used data source is an OPC item. This allows you to connect to an OPC server, whether it be locally or remotely. When you choose OPC item as a data source, there's a browse button to the right. When you select this button, another dialog appears, which you can use to then browse your OPC servers. Even if your service is connected over a remote system, you can choose local and you would be browsing OPC servers on that remote system using TCP connection, and you would eliminate the DCOM connection. We would then select the OPC server. We're going to use the EEI.OPC simulator. And let's go down into Sim Device, and we could take a look at some of the items that are under that group. If we select the ramp item, we'll see the full qualified OPC item is returned for you. You can optionally return additional properties from an OPC item. If we choose this option, then when we select the OPC item, the data type and other properties that are available for that item are returned for us. When we click OK, we can see that OPC item is returned for us. We can then apply the changes, and then if we have good connection, we should see the value appear in the black value field up above. When the data source is set to an OPC item, you can set the optional property to set the data source value to a fixed value or hold it to the last known good value when the OPC item provides bad data quality. The default is normal bad quality, which means if the OPC item does go into failure, all client connections will then present the proper reading as a bad quality. Another data type that's another data source that's very popular is a calculation. When we choose calculation, an edit button appears to the right. We can then do simple math equations. Let's take the example of adding two tags together. We would say insert tag. We're going to select the local service, but you could select a remote service as well for remote tag selections. Let's select the data source ramp2 and then select the value. We'll select OK. Then we'll use the insert function button to insert different functions that we might want to do. In this example, we're going to choose the add function, which is just simply a plus. Then let's insert another tag from the local service. This time let's select random2 value, click OK, and now as long as our equation is value, it will return, it will do a syntax check and it will validate that equation for us. We can then select apply changes, and now we see the value is the result of those two tags added together. So that's how to do real-time calculations. There are other types of functions. One of the more popular ones to use is the if statement. And using the if statement, we can then put a conditional statement in the first argument. Let's take the example that random2, and we're going to compare that tag. If it is, say, above 0.5, then we'll set the result value to 1. Otherwise, the result value will be 0. We'll move that conditional expression into the proper argument as the first argument itself. When we click OK, it validates the equation syntax is correct. When we then click Apply Changes, we see that the value toggles between 0 and 1 based upon whether random2 is greater than 0.5 or not. In a calculation, you can have as many different local and remote tags used, and you can manually type them in as well, or with all of the tag configurations, we always have a CSV import and export feature that's very useful to set up in Excel. Other data source types can be the system time clock. We can return, say, the year from the CPU clock, or maybe the current number of seconds that would range from 0 to 59, or choose seconds today. This is the total number of seconds that have elapsed in the current day. Let's see how we would configure a remote real-time database. In the network node field at the top, you can put in an IP address, network node name, or a registered domain name like we're going to use here. We're going to use opcsystemserver.com. When we hit the select button, we are now connected to a system registered in Texas, and as long as you have an internet connection, you'll then be able to see those tags and all the properties for a particular tag. Let's select the ramp2 tag. Then if we used OPC Server browsing, we would still want to use the local connection for the OPC Server browsing because we want that server to browse OPC servers local to it, even though we are configuring a system across the internet. When we then take a look at the OPC items on a particular server, you can see that the item path returned is a local OPC item. However, the service is running remotely on a remote system. Let's go back to our local service and let's configure some tags there. Let's add some new tags to the configuration. If we select Add Tag from the menu bar, and let's type in remote space calc for a remote calculation. We'll then select that tag from the list, and as a data source, we're going to set it to a calculation. What we're going to do here is we're going to create a calculation that is from a couple tags on that remote system across the internet. If we select the Edit button to the right, then when we select Insert Tag, this time in the Network Node field, we're going to put in that registered domain name, or it could be your own remote IP address if you'd like. When we hit the Select button, we are now browsing items on that remote service. So let's select the ramp2 button. You can see the tag returned is www.opcsystemserver.com/ramp2.value. We click OK, and now let's insert an addition, insert another tag, and again browse that remote service. We'll select random2 value. OK. So we're adding ramp2 and random2 from that remote service. Now when we click Apply Changes, we are getting the value from that remote system across the internet. Because we have built-in queuing, you can see that we're not dropping any values. Even if the internet connection was slow, we would deliver all values received from that remote service. Another way to do remote connection is from your own third-party OPC client. Let's say if you had a Wonderware or Incholution or RSView application, or even WinCC from Siemens. These are all OPC clients. From your third-party application, you can now browse our opcsystems.net OPC server that you would install locally to that system. Here we're going to use the opcsystems.net local configuration and connect to a local OPC server, which is opcsystems.net. We're going to select a local group of tags, and again we're going to select ramp2, click OK. When we apply changes, we are now going to get those values. If you would like your third-party OPC client to access a remote OPC system service, simply replace the local connection under the OPC item path and replace that with network, followed by the network node name, IP address, or registered domain name that you want to connect to. Then when you select Apply Changes, you will then be connected to that remote OPC system service tag. We can change the OPC update rate, and we can say even across the internet, the OPC client that's running locally here is connected through the opcsystems.net OPC server, and then using TCP connections with queuing to connect over the internet to that remote OPC system service.